Hi everyone. I wanted to come in here and do a review of a book I read earlier this year, and that book is Haruki Murakami's Kafka on the Shore. And I found it really interesting, and this is my second Murakami that I've read, so I just wanted to do kind of like a semi detailed review of it. I have my notes right here to share with you guys. So, my introduction to Haruki Murakami was through his novel Norwegian Wood, which I read when I was in university, and now I teach it at university as well. And Norwegian Wood was great, but I heard from everyone who read Murakami that this was his most light-hearted book, that it was the most easily digestible book that he has, and this was expected to be more bizarre, more magically realist in nature. And I thought about picking it up earlier this year, and it's pretty long. It is around more than 500 pages. So because I like Norwegian Wood so much, I thought I'd give this a try, and I give this a 4.25 star, I believe, which in my books, anything that is above 4 star is a pretty good book. So this one has full elements of magical realism from start to finish. It is really heavy with the magical realist theme. So if you're someone who is not familiar with magical realism, this is probably not the best book to begin with. Maybe begin with Norwegian Wood and then transition onto this, because this will feel really bizarre to you. But if you're someone who is familiar with magical realism, then familiar with Murakami, that is, I suggest you pick it up because it's really good. This book is like a trip. It will take you up and it will take you down. So it's great. So if I go into the synopsis, this is a 2002 novel. It got translated later on, I believe, if I'm not wrong, at 2005 or 2006, but originally it was written in 2002, and it primarily follows two characters. One of them is called Kafka. He is somebody who has named himself. We're never given his original name or what he was originally called, so he's called Kafka throughout. This is the name he gave himself. He's a 15-year-old runaway boy who always had this vision that he was going to run away in his 15th birthday, and he does so. And I believe, this is my deduction, is he's someone who is going through an existential crisis. When we turn 15, we are at the throes of young adulthood. So I fully believe he's someone who's going through a full-blown existential crisis. He also has this alter ego, a character called Crow, who he calls a boy named Crow. And this particular character is so striking in narration, and he is a character that is very much fully only living in the mind of this character Kafka. But this alter ego is someone who we see throughout the narration, and he's a very tough alter ego. He always keeps telling Kafka that he needs to be the toughest 15-year-old there ever lived. I want to read this passage out to you, which is at the very beginning of the book. It's at page 3, but it's so striking, and it's something that really urged me to read the book. So this is something that Crow tells Kafka when he's about to embark on his journey of running away from home. So he says, "Sometimes fate is like a small sandstorm that keeps changing direction. You change direction, but the sandstorm chases you. You turn again, but the sandstorm adjusts. Over and over you play this out like some ominous dance with death just before dawn. Why? Because the storm isn't something that blew in from far away, something that has nothing to do with you. The storm is you, something inside you. So all you can do is give into it, step right inside the storm, closing your eyes and plugging up your ears so the sand doesn't get in, and walk through it step by step. There's no sun there, no moon, no direction, no sense of time. just fine white sand swirling up into the sky like pulverized bones. That's the kind of sandstorm you need to imagine. So it's so beautiful, it's so amazing, and I feel like this boy named Crow is preparing Kafka to embark into adulthood. And this narration of the symbolism of the fact that adulthood or life in general or your pursuit into life is like a sandstorm, and it's a sandstorm you cannot help but go through, and you need to plug up your ears and you need to plug up your nose and you need to plug up your mouth, is I think such a beautiful rendition of what life and hardships can be. So Kafka decides that he's going to run away from home, but on the broader spectrum, he's also running away from something greater in his life, and he's running away from an edible curse. His father curses him with the fact that he is going to ultimately sleep with his mother and his sister, who have both abandoned him when he was a child. There are two characters that he sleeps with, an older woman and a younger lady. Whether or not these characters are in fact his mother and his sister is never really solidified, it's never stated plainly. And I think that really adds to the beauty of this really dark and mysterious novel. So he's a character, he's only 15, and he acts really tough and he acts really grown up. He has to, because he's been abandoned. And he has this very formal relationship with his father. His father and him stay at the same house, and it is implied that his father is very well to do. But it's also implied that his father is really busy in his own world, and Kafka is busy in his own world, and they barely interact. In fact, his father has, not to give you spoilers, his father has this huge incident happen to him, and Kafka is completely absent from that incident to the point where he has nothing to do with that incident. He wants nothing to do with that incident. There's also another character in this novel, a character that I found personally to be much more interesting than Kafka, even though Kafka is a very interesting character. But Kafka, I feel like, is a little bit misogynist. You have to bear in mind he is 15. And Murakami does have certain allegations of portraying females as in a very misogynistic tone. This other character is an older man called Nakata, and he's an older disabled man, and we're not exactly sure what his disability is, but we understand that he is a little bit slower than most people, and he has another very quirky disability, and that is that he can talk to cats. He can fully communicate with cats, and because he is a little bit slower than most people, he takes up the job of communicating with cats and finding lost cats. So I found that really interesting. Now, why the name Kafka? Why choose the name Kafka over everything else? What I think is that the character Kafka really mirrors the author Kafka. So Franz Kafka had a very tumultuous relationship with his father, and this character, Kafka Tamura, also has a very tumultuous relationship with his father. Also, Japanese society is not all that familiar with Franz Kafka, even though I think now it's changed, but in 2002, probably not that much. But Haruki Murakami is pretty westernized, he's pretty West influenced, so he had a connection with Kafka because the West has a pretty good connection with Franz Kafka. So I think that's why he named it. There's also a song, if you've read Murakami, you know that songs and music play a big part in the narration of Murakami. There's also a song called Kafka on the Shore, which coincidentally aligns with the name of this 15-year-old boy. That also probably could have some hand in that. And if I talk about the character Nakata, the way that he developed this disability is that when he was in school, when he was a child at school, he lived in the Yamanashi prefecture, and they went out to this field trip to this distant hill, and all of these school children collapsed. Unanimously, they collapsed. And they soon recovered from this collapse, and they couldn't remember why they collapsed or why they were there at the first place, except for the character of Nakata. Nakata was in a coma for several days, and after he finally regained his consciousness, he could just talk to cats. There are also a couple of other really bizarre things that happens to Nakata, which also makes him a runaway similar to Kafka. But if I tell you those plot points, it's going to be spoiling the novel, so you have to read it for yourself. There's also a forest in this narration that Kafka goes and lives in near the forest, and I found that really interesting because Murakami has a very interesting depiction of forests and nature. To him, nature and the forest are very dangerous forces that are beyond the world. They have a connection with the world, but it's usually where people go to experience really dangerous experiences. We also see that in Norwegian Wood, where the forest is a place of both healing and huge existential dreads. And similar to this book, the forest also is very elusive, it's very mysterious. So I found that really interesting how he incorporates this forest taken from, I'm sure, Japanese folklore and Japanese tradition onto a more character-based landscape. There's also the description of body, which I also found in Hankang, and I also find here, even though Hankang is South Korean and Murakami is Japanese, but it's greater Asian narrative. There's a character called Washima, who's a transgender gay man, and he's somebody who feels really trapped inside his own body, and you can really feel that. It's not like he's uncomfortable in his own body, but because he is transgender, he has a kind of push and pull with his body, similar to Kafka and similar to Nakata. Nakata is somebody who feels the most comfortable in his own body because he doesn't really see the world like most people do. But Kafka is someone who is hyper vigilant in taking care of his body. He's somebody who really works out very vigorously. So he's really focused on the aesthetics of his body, and I found that really interesting. There's also the character of Crow, who doesn't have a body at all. He is this alter ego, this shadowy influence over the character of Kafka. And I just found that so interesting. And the narration style, if I talk about the narration style, it's really easy, very indicative of Murakami. It took me a while to read it just because it's so long, but the long while that I did spend reading this book were really enjoyable. And the characters interchange between Kafka's narration and Nakata's narration, so I was really looking forward to reading Nakata's narration over Kafka's one, just because Kafka's narrations felt again a little bit misogynistic for my taste, and Nakata's ones just felt a little bit more interesting. So yeah, that was my little review of Kafka on the Shore. If you're planning on picking this up and you haven't read Norwegian Wood, I recommend that you read Norwegian Wood first and then pick this up. I think it would be just more enjoyable for you. And if you have read Norwegian Wood, then I highly recommend this one. I did like it a lot. It was really interesting. It was really bizarre, but and there are certain things that I don't even understand fully even now after having read the book, but I think that's just the beauty of this particular book. So thank you. Until next time, this has been Naz and Novels, and I hope you subscribe and comment on whether you read this book or not. Thank you.